I am the earth. I am the light. I set myself free.
So you were born with a guidance system. Are you aware of that? And your guidance system tells you everything that you need to know about anything that is important. And from our point of view, what we mean by that is your guidance system, your emotional guidance system, tells you everything that you need to know about your relationship with your source energy, about your relationship with you. Jerry and Esther have a guidance system in their monster bus. It's called Magellan. Magellan has one function: to help them get from wherever they are to wherever they want to be. So they program in the address of where they want to go, and then Magellan proceeds to give them verbal and visual instructions, turn by turn. Magellan never says to them, "Where have you been?" Because it is not important to know. Has nothing to do with Magellan's task at hand. Magellan never says to them, "How long have you been there?" Or, "I'm not going to tell you. You asked yesterday, I told you. You didn't listen. Now you're on your own." That's your mother. Magellan says, turn this way, and if Jerry and Esther deviate from the route that Magellan has suggested, if they take a fuel stop or a dinner stop, Magellan will say, "Please proceed to the highlighted route. Please proceed to the highlighted route. Please proceed to the highlighted route." She is relentless until they proceed to the highlighted route. Jerry will say, "Shut that broad up." If they decide to take a different route, Magellan will say, "When possible, make a legal U-turn." She never gives up. She never stops doing her job. And it's a woman's voice. The man's voice was far too bossy. She never stops doing her job. And her job is to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And you have a guidance system that in principle works exactly the same way. It is the emotions that you feel. Now, we want to talk to you, and we'll talk a great deal over the days that we are together about this emotional guidance system, because we want you to realize that until you are aware of your emotions and what your emotions are telling you vibrationally, then you don't have any guidance. You might as well just shut that broad up. But when you are aware of your emotions and what your emotions mean as you feel them, now you have supreme guidance. You have supreme guidance in the moment, guidance that will never let you down. We know sometimes our physical friends worry that they're not hearing accurately, or their guidance isn't telling them what they really need to know. And what we want you to leave here knowing as a result of this gathering in these days that we are together is that you can trust your guidance system. And in fact, it is our recommendation that it, even by the end of this week, become the only thing that you are listening to, that you disregard all outside influence about what you should be doing or where you should be going. Because if you will get a handle on the way your emotions feel and what they are telling you, then you will always be on your path. And of course, what is that path? It is the path of joy. It is the path of taking you to the glorious, joyous, deliberate, creative experience that you've come forth to live. You said, we remember it clearly, "I will go forth into this physical body and I will co-create with others. And together we will stir up for one another clarity about individual desire. And when desire is born within any individual," you said, "I understand that source energy will move heaven and earth, that all things will be orchestrated in order to accommodate the desire that I have worked through sifting the process, through sifting through the contrasting experience. I have worked to clarify, to give birth to." Many of you do not realize that that is your work, that your work is sifting through the contrast. And by contrast, we don't mean agony and defeat, although it can be some of that. We mean the variety of experiences that you're having, sifting through the contrast for the sole purpose of you selfishly and individually identifying a personal preference here and now. And you understood before you came forth into your physical body, and even for a while after you got here, that once that desire was formulated within you, that you would begin emitting a signal that source energy would begin responding to, and circumstances and events would be lined up, literally orchestrated on your behalf, lined up into your near and distant future. We would like to convey to you the stream of wonderful experiences that await you, that you, through your genius perspective, have set into motion. And we would like this gathering in these days that we are together to be a gathering where little by little, bit by bit, you come back into alignment with who you really are, so that all of those things that over a lifetime perhaps that you have set into motion, you will finally come into vibrational sync with. Sounds good, doesn't it? Yes. Joseph Campbell said a lot of things, but a phrase that he coined and really made famous that we consider to be the most profound words that have ever been uttered in human voice. He said, "Follow your bliss." And he was right on the mark in understanding that if you can get on track with following your bliss, that then you will be in constant, steady alignment or vibrational agreement with who you really are. And then not only will you be here in your physical experience, but you and all that you are will be there. In other words, the inner you, the Abraham of you, the God of you, the whole of you, present in every moment. Do you understand what that means? Present in every moment, smelling the roses, looking at the sea, watching the dolphins, loving one another, enjoying your food, loving your body, feeling exhilaration for life. In other words, this is who you are. Life is supposed to feel wonderful to you. And when you are in sync with who you really are, that's the way that it feels. But we notice as we watch some of you that you sometimes not only cannot follow your bliss, you can't even get a whiff of it. In other words, sometimes because of whatever it is you are giving your attention to, you are vibrationally quite far from what anyone would call bliss. And so we want you to understand that you can still follow the trail to bliss, and we want you to begin to understand that maybe it might be all right. Let's say you're over here beating the drum of depression. Doesn't matter how you got there, it feels pretty bad. You can hardly get a breath of air. And then some bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, sunshine, raindrop, lollipops, cotton candy, Abraham friend says to you, you know you create your own reality. And you say, surely that cannot be true, or you would be gone. It never feels very good to have someone who feels very good next to you when you don't feel very good, does it? In other words, it's a vibrational clashing. And what happens so often, you're surrounded by teachers who know that you really don't want to feel that way. And when you feel that way, they love you so much, they want to help you to feel better. And the only thing that they can suggest is that you try harder to feel better. But when you are vibrationally in that place, you can't get to that place. There is too much vibrational difference. So we want to talk about these vibrational variances just a little bit, and we want you to remember, you will, as you feel with us and think with us, you will remember this because you know it at every level of your being. In other words, this is knowledge that you know from your non-physical source energy perspective, and it's what you knew when you first got here and remembered for a while. It's what many of you are coming to remember again. So let's talk about this emotional scale. On one end of it is what you would call joy or ecstasy. This end of it feels very, very good. And we want you to feel with us that on this end of the emotional spectrum is the feeling of absolute empowerment. In other words, there you feel empowered and free. There you feel exhilarated. There you feel passion. In other words, there is where you're supposed to be. That's who you really are. On the other end of the scale, where depression is, or even where what you might call fear is, or where that feeling of despair is. And many of you don't go there very often. Many of you go there rarely. Some of you go there never. Many of you know people who are there, who go there frequently. That is the feeling of disempowerment. And when you think about it, when you think about emotions that you describe with words like fear, or when you describe with words like depression or despair, doesn't it feel like disempowerment? Isn't that the dominant basis of such a feeling? So, as we're talking about this emotional scale, we want you to realize that the emotions that you try to describe with words, it's a little tricky to try to put words to it. We'll do that today, and we can feel that very often you are, from the life experiences that you've been living, you are in rather good agreement about what the emotions feel like and mean. It is interesting how well you are able to identify them. But we want to remind you that there is an infinite range between this feeling of powerlessness and this feeling of empowerment. And it is more important that you recognize the movement of the feeling than it is important that you identify some word that best describes it. Because different people will use the same word and really mean different things. So we're going to talk about feeling. What we've noticed as we've been interacting with so many of you over time is that most of you who come to these gatherings come with a vibration that is somewhere in the area from overwhelmment and frustration all the way up to joy. In other words, that's your range. That's the harp you play right there. And you might occasionally dip into the lower registries of anger or even fear or even powerlessness, but most of the time you're here. But friends, you are teachers. You are teachers as we are teachers. And often you are interacting with someone who maybe hasn't been here in frustration and overwhelmment for a while. Maybe they've been here in a place of fear or even anger for a while. So we're going to show you how to help yourself move up this emotional scale. Some of you who haven't been listening to us for a while may be a little surprised that we may encourage you to work very hard to find the life-giving breath of fresh air of anger. And that may seem surprising because many of you have been at gatherings where someone has sat in the hot seat and we were not even willing to listen to them complain for even a little while about where they are. In other words, we're always encouraging you to talk about what you do want, not about what you don't want. But we want you to realize in these days that we are together that you cannot make the jump from one vibrational frequency to another. In other words, that's a sort of quantum leap that you will not be able to bridge. It is much more effective if you understand that you can move incrementally up the emotional scale. Of course, when you have your death experience, you can quantum leap. In one fell swoop, you leave behind all doubt and fear, all resistant thought, everything that is bothering you, and you reemerge into pure positive energy. But while you are still physically focused, it is ever so much more comfortable and more sustaining to move incrementally. So here is someone, let us say, for sake of this example, who is in this place of despair. And do you know, have you ever been around someone who went from a place of grief or true despair into anger? Maybe it's even happened to you. And what we want you to notice is that they feel better. You do, don't you? In other words, if you are in that depressed place where you can't get a breath of air and then you find something to focus upon that makes you angry, don't you agree that it does feel better? It does feel better. In other words, there is less resistance in anger than there is in depression. So The thing that we want you to pay attention to as you are moving up this emotional scale is that you are looking for the relief factor. In other words, we're talking about the art of allowing, but the art of allowing is really about releasing resistance. And every piece of resistance that you release leaves you in a place of vibrational allowing. You get a sense of this. So it's sort of like peeling the skin off the onion a little bit at a time. In other words, as you release a little resistance and release a little resistance, you get feeling better and better and better, but you don't do it all at once. So if you're in despair and you reach for the life-giving breath of fresh air that anger will bring you, as you find that anger, there is relief in that. And then here is the most important part. You stop in the midst of your anger and you consciously acknowledge, I deliberately chose this angry thought. And this is the key to this deliberate motion up this emotional scale. You must acknowledge that you did it on purpose, because it is the powerlessness that has been making you feel the way you've been feeling. And do you know that if you only make the move from despair into anger, you understand everything you need to know about following your bliss, because you are now, believe it or not, on the trail of bliss, because you are much more likely to be able to find from your place of anger the deliciousness of frustration and overwhelmment that you did not have access to before. And from frustration, you can move easily into hopefulness, or even into belief, or even into knowing, even into that place of joy and love and ecstasy. So it's about taking the bridge. Some of you may have had the experience or have known someone who was in this place of depression, and they made their way into anger, and then they were counseled by family and friends or even professionals that their anger was misplaced. We understand that. You may be too. In other words, your friends liked you better when you were depressed. You go away and leave everyone alone. When you're angry, you're sort of hard to deal with. But it's an interesting thing to see you in your depression, finding even unconsciously the relief that anger brings you. In other words, your inner being is really guiding you there, only to see you then judge yourself about the inappropriateness of your anger and return to despair. Jerry and Esther traveled a great deal from Phoenix to San Diego, always so eager to get to San Diego. It's a 400-mile journey out across the desert. And they're moving along, and about halfway is a city called Yuma, Arizona. When they get to Yuma, Arizona, they are not where they want to be. They are far from where they want to be when they're in Yuma, Arizona. But they do not feel so unhappy about not yet being where they want to be that they get all disoriented and turn around and go back to Phoenix. In other words, they understand the journey between San Diego and Phoenix, or Phoenix and San Diego. It's an easy to understand journey, that one, isn't it? In other words, you sort of know which way is west. You're on the road. There aren't that many roads out there in the desert. You can't get lost. And so they have this sense, this very calming sense, that if they're facing in the right direction and they continue to keep moving, that they must eventually get to where they want to be. And we want you to understand that about your own guide system. But the tricky thing is, not so tricky, but really worth noting, you got to be facing in the right direction. And unless you're finding continual relief from where you are, you may not be facing in the right direction. So here you are, feeling grief, feeling despair, feeling powerlessness. You light on some thought of anger. You begin to breathe a little bit better, and you got to admit it does feel better, which means you are moving in the right direction. And then someone who really means well says to you, you know, you shouldn't be angry, and then you end up back in depression. And we say, when possible, make a legal U-turn. So as we are moving forward here today, we want to show you how you can move up this emotional scale. We want to show you how reaching for feelings of relief will take you into better and better and better feeling vibrations. And the wonderful thing about that is, are you getting the sense of what art of allowing is? Do you understand that if you move only from what others do not think is nearly far enough, but we think is a very good hour or day's work to move from depression to anger, if you only move that far and you only feel that much better, do you understand that you have changed your entire position under the universe, that much of a vibrational movement means your point of attraction has shifted significantly enough that you're going to begin to rendezvous with things that you did not have access to before you made the shift. And as you begin to feel things shifting, then you begin to feel a little bit more optimism. You begin to feel a little bit more in control of your own experience. So friends, whether you know it or not, you are the creator of your own experience. And whether you have yet come into conscious alignment with this idea or not, no one else is the creator of your experience. No one else can get inside of you and offer a vibration. It is certain you can observe something and you can offer a vibration about what you are observing, but you are the one that controls the direction of your thought. Therefore, you are the one that controls the direction of your vibration. Therefore, you are the one who controls your point of attraction. Therefore, you and only you are the creator of your own experience. And when you get in alignment with your own emotions and you begin to feel the effortless experience of just reaching for the thought that feels better and reaching for the thought that feels better, what begins to happen is you begin to finally stand in the place that you stood in when you were born, the place of worthiness. You're all there whether you know you are or not. The place of blessedness, the place of receiving everything that you want quickly. No more stale desires.